una vez en tibetano y una vez en español.
Ok.
Uno y uno.
Todos los seres sintientes, mis madres, especialmente aquellos enemigos que me odian, obstructores que me dañan y los que crean obstáculos en mi camino hacia la liberación y la omnisciencia, puedan ellos experimentar felicidad, ser separados del sufrimiento y pueda yo rápidamente establecerlos en el estado de la insuperable, perfecta, completa y preciada budeidad. Así, hasta que alcance la iluminación, realizo acciones virtuosas con cuerpo, palabra y mente. Hasta mi muerte, realizo acciones virtuosas con cuerpo, palabra y mente. Desde ahora hasta mañana a esta misma hora, realizo acciones virtuosas con cuerpo, palabra y mente. En el Buda, el Dharma y la más excelente Sangha, tomo refugio hasta alcanzar la iluminación, que por el mérito de la generosidad y otras perfecciones pueda alcanzar la budeidad para beneficio de todos los seres sintientes.
Hello, everyone. I just posted the English
Felicidad
text
y las
on
causas
the
de la
chat.
felicidad, que puedan liberarse del sufrimiento y de las causas del sufrimiento, que nunca sean separados de la felicidad libre del sufrimiento, que puedan permanecer en ecuanimidad, libres de odio y apego. La tierra es regada con agua perfumada y cubierta con flores. Está adornada con Meru, la montaña suprema, los 4 continentes, el sol y la luna. Como una tierra pura de Buda la ofrezco. Que todos los seres sintientes alcancen la felicidad de las tierras puras de los Budas. A los lamas que poseen los 3 kayas ofrezco las ofrendas externas, internas y secretas. Con mi cuerpo, riqueza y todo lo que es visible, por favor, concédanme la suprema realización, la iluminación. Om Guru Deva Dakini Randa Mandala Pratisa Soja. Dedico el mérito que haya generado a través de postraciones, ofrendas, confesar, regocijar, solicitar y suplicar al logro de la iluminación de todos los seres sintientes.
Gumbo tuje jede batan jenjen batun babu suna yon dinjam tuje te yinye la chan zalo taban do jata wa je kewe nge zon le do ge je do zon dan jo jo wa je jo jo la chan zalo do ne do la mian la ba ta la rab de ge jenga tamba yon de yen de la yan chan zalo do di jan de salam na ro tamba ba ma na ju je Gamo baba mondo ba jawan ro ba ga ju la ma na lang go san sa on ne ju den je po ra ni ju san je kun je ngo ni ra sin je ngo zo den je sa la ma na la go san sa ba den sa la ma mo ji da ge jo be ma de yo ne ga den je me go ne ji san de ko so to je ngo do sa do so sam dong a jen do je jen je nya so me bo jo a ji la so jen je do de nyu da da je tam ba nam je nem do za do so o tsama la ta hi de le tere nga tso pardo trogo kola ma dekhe se ya te toma teren tango tso ya tende che yinba.
Primero quiere decir
So Tashitelek everybody, and today we are starting the teachings, the commentary on the Six Bardos.
Y hoy vamos a empezar con esas enseñanzas de los seis bardos y empezamos con lo primero.
Tende tata pardo trog chi te goro rumbo che gen je ya pa la tene te tong karma lemba de turap kyub ba na ni sum pa ke te tong tende che re kong ke tene den changwa ke tene karma lemba ke chuko mangbo je yo pa ka na ni tene tata pardo trog ko te ta te shi trog chuko to so tra chi hu jing ke chu chen ji cha de yo re.
So the teachings on the Six Bardos originally come from Guru Rinpoche, and they were hidden as a dharma and later revealed by the Derten Kamalingpa in the 14th century. He revealed this dharma, many dharmas actually, and among the many dharmas that he had revealed, the most well-renowned ones, the most important ones are the Six Bardos and the cycle on the peaceful and wrathful deities.
Y reveló esas enseñanzas preciadas de los seis bardos y también sobre los pacíficos y los airadas, los 100 pacíficos y airadas deidades. Y entre todas estas enseñanzas, esos son los que son lo más importante.
Tinin dala pardo trog si cheta nga zo pardo si yondi che hobde kala kuwa lintan la chi she tsawe ji so chaya ke che tini te tawo kan chadang ra manda che yopa tela pardo namju te ser de yora wa she tsawe ji chaya che yimban ra o che nang yori te ta den chen che tsawa ka kapsun nan chaya ka pardo te chi pu lab yo mare ngaran so ta nekap tamche pardo le mande ba tende che chade yore tendu metse nde yang pardo che tata nga so pardo tambo te chene pardo se yonde aso metse nde la lapendo wa o tende ndu nekap tamche pardo la tende che ngunze ne teni de tsin mandawa trog la pa yen teni te la tende sen nyamsulin tang chi chade yorba.
So in general, when we hear this term bardo, then what directly comes to our mind is the period that occurs after we have died, and then the various manifestations that manifest in the bardo after death. So normally this is what we think is the bardo. But here in this context of the Six Bardos, actually, it's not just the bardo after death, but actually it is said that all times, every moment belongs to a bardo, is an intermediate, a transitionary period. So this life too has a bardo, and the first bardo is the bardo of living. So this is what we call this life. So there is no moment where there is no bardo. We are always in some kind of bardo. And so here, and this is a teaching from a practical perspective, and that divides everything into six bardos from a practical perspective.
ver con el tiempo después de morimos. No solamente es que hay el bardo, que los bardos empiezan en este tiempo. Por ejemplo, y hay muchas maneras a clasificar los bardos. Y por ejemplo, ahora, cuando estamos vivos, esta etapa desde el tiempo cuando nacimos hasta que morimos, hasta que el fin de esta vida, eso se llama el bardo de nacimiento. Y todo es de vida, entonces es un bardo. Y entre esta vida también hay otros bardos. Y esta tradición a clasificar los bardos es el sistema de los 6 bardos que que vamos a aprender o hablar sobre este sistema de clasificación de las 6.
Bardo se de ta bi chuin da oje pan sam je tende je la go yo de ta da ngo chu je ne bardo se bardo tambo te ta chu je ne pa hia ngo ma zo ke shine ge ma te ge baro ti mo che de la ma zo chu je ne ta ne de pa ne ka de la je ne bardo se de bardo tambo te te cha ge yo re ba.
Y como
so this term bardo refers to a state in between, an intermediate state. The first bardo, the bardo of living, begins the moment we are born and it lasts until the day we die. So our entire lifetime, really, we can say, is the bardo, a bardo of living. So while we are alive. So this is the first bardo, the bardo of living.
Empieza cuando nacemos y entramos esta vida cuando nacemos. Eso es el tiempo que demarca o que hace que ya ya estamos en este bardo de nacer y dura hasta que el tiempo que salimos de este cuerpo, hasta el tiempo de la muerte.
Yina yang ta nga tsu jene bardo ka nang lo tene ta malam ka bardo ta samdin ka bardo su ju te ni jene ka bardo di na chui de ba yina kare se ne de chin ka ha la ye go yo re se na ta ne dang man da wa la ti ne nga tsu nam ju ta pe na ta bardo ndere se la pa ti ko ka ping yo ma re ta tel ping pa ka dama jene bardo ka so nga so kare se go yo re ta o te na yin ta nga so nam ju chena ta pa ni ko yo ra o te yang nyam le la cher to pa je se na kande se go yo re se na te la ta bardo yin ba je ka tanye se de ne malam bardo se na malam ka kap so nga so nyam le kande se go yo kande se go te la de chin lo stina na he teni something bardo se ba kap se na ta nga so gom ja ba kap su sem ge ne ta te yang de manda ba re wa che pa jin je re de kap su ta gom ja ba ne ta ta kande je yong go yo re se ta re yong de so la ke je che se na ma he ya tende yo re wa
Disculpa,
So the first bardo is the bardo of living. And so within this bardo of living, there are two more bardos. There is also the bardo of dreaming, and then there's the bardo of meditation. So why is it that we separate them out and categorize them into different bardos? It's because we go through different states of mind during different times in our lives. So if we just say, oh, this is a bardo, this is this bardo, that alone will not benefit us. What we need is an instruction as to what to do in that bardo. So in the first bardo of living, we are given instructions. What do we need to do? What do we need to practice while we are alive? And then when we are sleeping at night, we are dreaming. So then again, there are instructions. How can we practice even in the sleep state? So therefore, there is the bardo of dreaming. So we learn how we are able to even practice at that time. And then during the bardo of meditation, then we are given instructions how to practice when we are meditating. So when we are meditating, our mind is in a different state again. So therefore, there are different instructions that are given. So then during meditation, what do I need to do? What do I need to practice? These are the instructions on the bardo of meditation. So in this way, each of the bardos has practical instructions as to what we can practice in this specific transitionary period of time.
Los tiempos de soñar o de los sueños, del bardo de los sueños y también de la meditación. Entonces hay instrucciones para llevar la experiencia de los sueños a la práctica. Y también hay instrucciones cómo manejar al mejor potencial este bardo de meditación, de samadhi. Mientras que meditamos, el mente está comportando en otra manera, en otro nivel. Y entonces hay instrucciones por cada uno.
Teni pardo yipanda wo yenan cheka pardo si tan chene ke sinen chejo la tha tin khine teni mashika paro tela yang ko ne tan khanda wo chi chaka yore ti kapsu nyamne si jo kar yore ta ti ko kap jelen kar yongo yore es ti ko te ta cheka pardo ka tresin yongo yore wa.
Y también tenemos este bardo de la muerte.
And so then the fourth bardo is the bardo of dying. And so that begins the moment it is certain that you are going to die, and it lasts until you actually die. And again, during this time, the state of mind is again different. So again, we are given instructions on how we can practice at that time, what opportunities will arise at that time. So these are the instructions on the bardo of dying.
De la muerte, cómo podemos practicar y cómo podemos manejar esa experiencia en la mejor manera.
Teni ngapa tela chunyi ke pardos ta hit sawe jisu teni nawan da mandan chaya tan dra tan wu tan ser tan teni ke nawan da mandan chawan bu kapsu ta tela pimpa ke teni danga te ngapa ji teni ti ji ni ma ro ne tso kapsu jor ma ro wa yena teni mama ro ne teni ta jewa ji ma limpa ke teni se lu tsan ne ta tela sipa pardos ne ta te de tin mandawa drugla yene teni te 소소 같은 핀게 당아 냠스 린단 가르 고고 요래 시야 야바들 바도 tukte la ko yore ba.
And then the fifth bardo is the bardo of Dharmata, and this arises when we have already died, and after death, then various appearances become manifest, such as various sounds and lights and light rays and so on. So all sorts of appearances manifest. And for this specific time, again, there are very specific instructions on how to practice at that time. And then if one is not liberated at that time, then one continues on. And then one is in search of a new body, taking on a new life. And so this period is called the Bardo of Becoming. So in this way, everything that we experience is divided into these 6 transitionary periods of time, 6 different categories or divisions. We are given instructions on what can be helpful during that time.
Virginia?
So these are the teachings on the 6 Bardo.
Let me send a message.
Aquí está. ¿Y qué es esta de aquí?
Koya mepa chabiti.
Parece, it seems,
Salió de la sesión.
yes, I don't know why she's not in the session anymore. Something happened. Let me ask her.
Ya está, ya.
Okay, she's here.
Hola, ¿me escuchas?
Ahora
Yes,
sí.
now we hear you.
Disculpa, no sé qué pasó. Conta, no. Con mazón. China connection yapo. Nene chini connection ngaso sarpa chik zoyore. Yene yang samsam la che dogyo sare ha con mazón.
Oh ya da.
Da nga karpa la dawa zoayin.
Da jorcha imbechu.
Y hasta dónde me escuchó?
Da pardo tambo que tiene pardo se yutela.
Estábamos empezando el bardo del devenir es el de renacer.
Bueno, creo que lo que perdió era que entonces hay instrucciones para esos 2 bardos para cómo manejar esta experiencia del bardo de Dharmata y también del devenir.
Da pardo tambo tiene que pardo ne kabla da kar go yore sen ta nga son di cha na dena. Cha je yo ka cha pardo molam cha je yo. E ma ti lo di je ma da la tiene pardo cha dun da. Se la lo me le lo pan se ne. Tu sa gom sa ma yin la na yo. Nasen Lang Kosong Jursa, Melulinji Topu to Chunder, Yema Lana Dubu Tuminpe, to two means it in Chudeta, Yene Pardo Cap, Damanda or what they Majilo Zambo.
Y en el texto.
So then during the first Bardo, how do we need to practice? What are the instructions during the Bardo of living? So there is a prayer, the root verses that we are basing the teachings on. And it first says here, for the Bardo of living, now when the Bardo of living is dawning upon me, I will abandon laziness for which life has no time. Enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation, making projections and mind the path, and realize the three kayas. Now that I have attained a human body, there is no time on the path for mind to wander. So these in brief are the instructions that we need during the Bardo of living.
Entonces esto es
so during the time of the Bardo of living, we learn about the common preliminary practices and the uncommon preliminary practices, and then also move on to the practices of shamatha and vipassana, where we are introduced to the nature of our mind. So during our entire lifetime, this is how we practice during the Bardo of living.
Que todos tienen en sus papeles, creo, y eso tiene la esencia de estas instrucciones es aquí, a no perder esta oportunidad a usar esta vida para conseguir todo lo que podemos conseguir espiritualmente. Entonces también dentro de eso son las instrucciones de los preliminarios, de los preliminarios común y también entonces podemos hacer una vez en tibetano y una vez en español.
Okay.
Uno y uno.
Tatelo komdi chaya ta tini jima malam produce ni mambo chi khaya yorwa o ti korte malam pardo ke thi te cha yor ne ta man do cham ngo tu tam rawo tambo sena.
Y después tenemos
so I think I was cut out from the teachings here. I only heard the last sentence where Gabriel Lama said that we familiar and then we learn. So I guess it's the Bardo of meditation, and then in the Bardo of the dreaming, we learn how to recognize the dream and then transform and also multiply and so on one and travel in our dreams.
A reconocer estas ilusiones del sonido como ilusiones.
Something party treat the kare yori sena ta nyamli gom ja yo ba kapsu ta tela che kai tang korsa la che kexer tang pondu tangune semo treyate tatikene pardo kapsu tichi tengondu song sarwariwa tene malam pardo kapsu ta kexer pondu la sopa ta gomte yakje tong ti korte ta mala something pardo chi chade ore
So then during the Bardo of meditation, the instructions that we receive pertain to the time when we are actually practicing meditation, and then it points out the different obstacles that we could encounter and kind of side tracks that could occur, and then there are instructions on how to move beyond them and how to clear those hindrances away. So we have already been introduced to the nature of the mind before. We've already received all the instructions. And then in the Bardo of meditation, we put them into practice. And then also in the Bardo of dreaming, we are introduced to how we practice there and what hindrance and how we can overcome them and so on and develop in our practice while we are dreaming. So these are the instructions for the dream and the part of dreaming and part of meditation.
Y cuando sabemos manejar la meditación en una manera que podemos también llevarlo al bardo del sueño, esto también nos hace, nos ayuda mucho, y también cuando sabemos manejar la meditación en una manera correcta.
Yiban cheke pardu chite kari rizena nga zo namjun da pache ha go yorin powa namsu lindanga korte cheke pardu chi chade yore.
Y cuando
And then the instructions that we receive for the Bardo office, they are the instructions on Poa, or the transference of consciousness. So these are the instructions during the Bardo of dying.
Practicar la Poa.
Ta pardo nga pa chuni ke pardu chite la dan de zokchin ke chuka je yindu zokchin ta to sene tani chikchu mare ko thogar ke korte pardo nga pa chuni pardo ke chinda wo chago yore kare sena da te kapsu chacha mangu den chane tene te ra nang yin pa ngoma hine tene te la pe che yin tun zine nin zin wang ge yin tun zine tene jing nang da ngan ra la so pa sen chon ro ge yor ba te en chon man ro cha ma ra nang yin pa ngo hi wa ge ta tu gar ge chi te chuni pa lo che cha ge yor
Then for the Bardo, the fifth Bardo, the Bardo of Dharmata, the instructions are instructions that we normally receive during Dzogchen teachings. And so since this is Dzogchen Dharma teaching, the Togal instructions that we receive in the context of Dzogchen are actually instructions specifically for the Bardo of Dharmata. And during the Bardo of Dharmata, various appearances become manifest. And so if we do not recognize them to be our own projections, we will see them as something other. So we grasp at it as separate from us in a dualistic way. And that creates fear and panic in our mind. And then that fear and panic makes the mind become more confused. So instead of being confused, we need to recognize that all of these appearances are the projections of our own mind. And so these are the instructions on the 5th bardo of Dharmata.
La realidad es que no hay sin fijación podemos saber que son ilusiones, que son los proyectos de nuestra mente misma. Y entonces todo son apariencias de la mente misma. Entonces estas instrucciones son sobre ese tema.
Bardo Tupa Sipa Bardo Chite Tangazo Yedam Yamlin Siatan Jeram Gomyatan Tachi Yedam La Tepa Tanan Siatan Teni Kunjosan La Chik Mugutan Namju Masoche Bakchanda Uzogomani Komlinda Teta Yoya Tazo Sama Sipa Bardo Kapsu Teni Gung Kochemboje Chagayore. Lakbad Wangbu Ramdao Yena, Wangbu Yang Ramdao Ganza de Yena, Tatanga so Wang Kapso, Wang Sumbak Tunda, Wang Sumbak Tunda de Tesa Gomri Yobatana, Telata Tebatana, Tundaji Yomba, take Nargo Kago Yoro, Tajewa Yanja Chuli, Lindap Sipa Kapsa, Tenin Doa Rectal and Jema Soaras and Nargo Kago Yori, T Tapandanga. So that Chagayori, Wampo Yarab Jena, Teta Ganyami, Titan, the Lawan Roke, and the Nyamsuli Yati Chagayo Samari.
And then 6th are the instructions on the bardo of becoming, the 6th bardo. And so it is at this time where we make use of our practice of the Yidam deity, the generation stage, our faith, our pure perception toward the Yidam, and the 3 jewels. So, which is why now we are placing imprints into our mind. So we become familiarized with it, with all those practices, because it will be most beneficial and useful during the bardo of becoming. And so if one is a person that is of highest mental capacities, then such a person will have understood the meaning of the 3rd empowerment during an empowerment, and will have familiarized themselves with that meaning. And such a person will also possess faith and a pure perception. And these are the tools that help that person then to block the, and so one doesn't have to take birth again. So when it comes to the point where one is about to take birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara, there are instructions, methods to prevent that from happening, to block the womb entrance. And so these are the instructions in the 6th bardo. But in general, they are practiced by practitioners who are of highest mental capacities. At that time, it's not very easy to engage in practice otherwise.
Visión pura muy desarrollada puede entrar su práctica en una manera que no tiene que nacer en uno de estos 6 reinos de seres.
Tate Pado Tokitang, Mokunda Chagayo, Tata Naso Pado Tambo, Jene Pado Capsoi. Then Tata Koni Hupanang, Tati Chitela, Jetan Tumong Lob Jong La Sobatan the Song Yuri. Lob Jong Nani, Tajetanga, so Lodo Nang Jetan Hondo Tumong Mayimba Hondo year, De La Sopatic Band or Song Yuri. Then Della Mexaka Karasong Yuri Sena Chick, Lodo Ganam Yuganani. Corvini make a cortella, young to some notane, Nimjong ko lo shok chenpo che ya tempe chung se gore se ne tikola nintendo se ne sondo.
Y
And so this is a brief introduction to the Six Bardos, but now we come back to the Bardo of living, the first Bardo, and go into more depth in the first Bardo. So as we mentioned before, the instructions that are useful during the first Bardo are the instructions on the common preliminaries, such as the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, and then also the 4 uncommon preliminaries and so forth. So generally, the instructions are quite similar on these topics. But what is slightly unique here in these instructions when it comes to the 4 thoughts that turn the mind is that here special emphasis is placed on again and again reflecting on the suffering, the faults of samsara. And here the emphasis is made that one should make a really great effort to cultivate a strong sense of renunciation. So this is really emphasized here.
otra vez, hasta que surge una renunciación muy fuerte. Entonces, mayormente, vida, el bardo de vida tiene que ver con la práctica de cultivar renunciación.
Tata Kolbe donga yaku ha ko teni ngimjong shok chenpo jena pinto kare yoresina teni chu nyamle se pate ngune dane ke chu yang dakpa chagri te ma to jetan chun dawa nyamle se ho sana jeng jik ten la te san ren ro ne chu yang dakpa tema ye cha to ko mari song do wa.
And so then what's the benefit of understanding the suffering of samsara and cultivating a strong sense of renunciation? The benefit is that through that, one's dharma practice will become really authentic. Otherwise, we might have a general interest in practicing the dharma. We think we want to practice the dharma, but it still somehow becomes kind of intermingled with our worldly concerns. And therefore, it doesn't usually become authentic that way.
Reflexiones muy profundamente, es cierto, es posible que nuestra práctica de Dharma siempre va a estar metido a los aspiraciones mundanas.
Tata mtsegena la che kanga da donga jungwu kapsu te ngone dane ke che pe pyonda wo tang xin te che chula njukwa ke che chula ya kurma si ya ke jin da wo che cha tende che ngone se na chu yang da pa che nyam le se me na te ken ko ba na ke kanga da donga to so te sar ke yo ba la te ne te ni chu pa yang da pa cha ge ya sare.
So in one's lifetime, if you are able to really use the difficulties and all the suffering you encounter, then that will actually help you enter the Dharma and also help you, encourage you to practice the Dharma. So actually, in order for our Dharma practice to become really authentic, we do need to encounter some of that. We need to know and experience the suffering, the hardship of samsara. And only when we know that and we really want to practice the Dharma, only then we become a real authentic Dharma practitioner.
empujan a realmente dedicarnos al Dharma en una manera muy auténtica. Y entonces pues, así podemos practicar el Dharma verdadero en una manera auténtica que realmente es el Dharma perfecta o correcta. Y realmente
So in this way, if you see it in this way, when you encounter difficulties, so first you encounter difficulties, and often they make you encounter the Dharma and make you practice the Dharma well. So then later, when you look back to it, you will difficult circumstance actually was of great benefit to me. So you will feel grateful for this opportunity. So in this way, it really becomes an encouragement for you to really practice the Dharma authentically. So if you see it in this way, then you will gradually also know how to practice with various difficult circumstances that you might encounter along the path.
Un beneficio muy grande, son es como una bendición, porque eso sirve a realmente empujar la práctica, ¿no? A inspirarnos a realmente practicar en una manera muy auténtica y verdadera.
Tatandi Tatsai Nantananda Sondua, Tsela Lomi, Lelo Pansenes, Tusan Gomson Mayan Lamlanjo, Sitangazo, Ata Jene Pardosenanda, Timulunde, Koka Petsa Chimbojeri, Tate, Tutu Chola Chuni Matama Jene, Ta Tambu Chula, Nyamle, Te Chola Mazon, Mutse Chola Mazon, Siguri Sonatana Sondua. Tate mche chola mason ati song ala cargo yore sena tatanga to tumong ke ngondo lodo namje to chuko le sano yabu tan te sare ka ngarang sem la che nipa nye ya che mazong ko par de tele yana yandu sano tan tendu go do wa
Y
so here in the root verse, it says, I will abandon laziness for which life has no time, enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation. So now during the bardo of living, during our lifetime, while we have a precious human body, we actually have an extremely precious opportunity. And it's crucial that we do not waste this opportunity, but rather use this life to practice the Holy Dharma truly. So here we are given instructions that it is important not to waste our lives away. And so what can we do so as not to waste our lives? So first we begin by reflecting on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, the common preliminaries. Really think about them well and think about those 4 thoughts again and again until you really reach some certainty.
Hacia el Dharma.
Ata tumong ngondo sen lodo namje ten ta tekpa chembo tang sangha tang sotar ke tekpa chama ke che mangyen ra wo che tata ke lodo namba yete 자가 요리 로도 넘버 예 대대사를 그 줄라 떼와 예나 되니 뭐텔라 셈라 대사를 그 되니 저와제 용 셈될 대사를 그 자체 셈자체 점서 셈 루룬다고 제 용을 그 망이 대사를 그 빈셈진다고 제 용을 그 망이 되니 초용 거 요래 전도제 정화 예나 되니 다다 무이게 다 제조라 소바제 냠술레 마히나야 되니 돈도 되니 셈들은 저와 태우나 되니 되게 요래
And so the common preliminaries, the four thoughts that turn the mind, are the foundation of all the vehicles of the Mahayana, of the secret Mantrayana, and also of the Pratimoksha, the path of individual liberation. So a person who really develops some certainty in those four thoughts, their mind will really change somewhat, and their mind becomes a little bit more vast and more relaxed. So it's the foundation for that to happen. It's the foundation for cultivating an altruistic mind. So then if you have that as a foundation, then even later on, when you come to the main part of practice, even if you don't really know how to do various practices like the generation and the completion stages, you already have changed your mind. Your mind has transformed, and that is actually enough.
A través de todos los niveles, es como alguien que tiene estas reflexiones muy profundamente en su mente. Eso realmente hace un cambio muy grande. Alguien que tiene eso, su mente... realmente cambia, hay una transformación y la mente se hace que expande la mente, que la mente vuelve a estar más ancho, más con más espacio, más relajado y también con una naturaleza de bondad, que quiere que naturalmente alguien que tiene estas reflexiones naturalmente quiere beneficiar a los demás, y entonces eso es la razón que realmente estos cuatro pensamientos son como fundamentales a todo el camino de la práctica budista, y aunque quizás alguien no sabe las prácticas más avanzadas, las prácticas de generación o las prácticas de compleción, no sé cómo decir eso. Completion and the generation and completion stage practices, aunque alguien quizás no tiene esos, no importa, todavía está bien porque tiene la esencia cuando tiene esta reflexión, cuatro pensamientos o reflexiones.
Jene Bardos nga tso matsen dayang Bardos in lao go bujumsin che kar chago yorisena nga tso tatani tatene kamne Bardo na yin se ta te yang ngone dane tat matsen dayang dimba ma yin ba che jujin zomba la tine ne kap te malam na yin ro che ngone ton to dimba tropa che yo marwa te la tine tat matsen de dendu dimba che la manjima se na che te na yesen ta tona teni pinto chembo che yong yore tung bu teni te ta cha de yore ma zo pen ta che za be jisu ma zu ma chen de ta pa ko ji malam na yesen go ma te go malam na yesen pa ta zuma ro cha cha wa ba te ta ta ni ta zuma yin ba la yin ba ta ta ni shi ba se ne tendo se chik ta thamna teni ngaran so ge che zemba ta nyumon ta ti to te sa shok chung ma nyom ro ya pe pinto chenpo yo re so yo.
And also a reason why it is actually very beneficial that we call this lifetime a bardo, an intermediate state, is because it's very good if we see this life just like a bardo, because that way we will also not cling to the true existence of this life so much. And we are more likely to recognize that this life is just a coming together of various causes and conditions. And so, therefore, it appears just like a temporary dream. And this is really what it actually is. This life doesn't really exist. So it is just that we believe that it exists. But when we see it for what it really is, then we will not cling so much to the reality of it and so on. And that is very beneficial. So, for example, after you have died, when you look back at your life, this life appears just like one dream, the dream of last night, just one night's dream fading away. And at that time, this life is completely unreal. It's just now we think that it's real. So therefore, it's very beneficial if we understand already now that this life isn't so real. Because if you understand that right now, then also your fixations, your grasping, your afflictive emotions will become lesser and lesser that way.
Tanto a lo que pasa en la vida, no tenemos tanto apego, no tenemos tanto sufrimiento, porque sabemos que es nada más como un sueño.
Teni tata ti tsa tsai nang tene nang sem lam long kusong ngunjur sa song duwa tsai ki la nang sem lam tsa tsai nang tata tsa tsai nang tata jene pado ko tala re tate tunda dodo rao te re nang sem lam long kusong ngunjur sa sin ta ngaran tso tata pardo chok sin de tawa jen mambo sin rinpa jen de ma ro goya ke ma yete kare re ma yete kare re sin tata ngaran tso ke ta chik mabju be sem tata tamarwa ke chik hipa jangba ji dali te ke sem te ta te koran chezo kulo che ngaran tso churwan rao ke wangla shone zimba hyok churwa ke wangla shone teni pardo mambo se rinpa jen de ro gowa je teke chaswa res une se na sem se je te la ta ko ni se me pa ka tongba sa tong ta kar se goro chik une se na ko la chik drop de pa je yo ma re te nga so ko drop de wa na yin se na teni rinpa jen de pe pa kyan thu bo ko ma pardo tro se na teni jewa mambo ro go ya te teke chaswa res tenju ta ngaran so ke na sem lang lo ta sem ke ne ta ngoma te kare re da ta te chur ngo hi pa se ne teni te la komdu yo pa che se ne tende se go re se na sem lang long se na te re wa
And so now in the root verse, it says, making projections and mind the path and realize the three kayas. So this is the meaning of what we have just mentioned before. So actually the reason why we have to go through different bardos, 6 different bardos and so on, is because the mind is confused. So actually, and therefore what one needs to recognize is to make projections and mind the path is that you recognize your mind as it is in its natural state without doing anything to it. The ordinary consciousness as it is. So that mind need to be recognized. If we don't recognize it and we enter into grasping, the mind will become confused. And when the mind is confused, it has to go through various projections of its own. So therefore it goes through the various bardos and so on. So actually from the mind itself, within the mind itself, everything is non-dual. Mind is empty, clear and empty. And it doesn't actually inherently exist. But we think that there is something that really exists. And this thinking has caused us to create many thick layers of habitual imprints. And it's because we are completely confused that we have to go on and on through those 6 bardos and take on many lifetime over lifetime. So the instruction here is recognize the true natural state of the mind, and having recognized it, habituate to it.
Pero en realidad no hay dualidad. La mente es uno mismo y todas las apariencias también son nada más que proyecciones de su mente, de nuestra mente mismo. Y es completamente vacío, es la vacuidad que es pervada por la iluminación. Es la unión de la luminosidad y la vacuidad. Aparte de eso, no hay algo que realmente existe. No hay ninguna manifestación que es real en nada que aparece. Pero cuando tenemos esta fijación de dualidad y pensamos que sí existe, que sí es real y tenemos todas las emociones que surgen porque a través de esta fijación tenemos que viajar por todos los 6 bardos y viajamos así por vida después de vida después de vida sin parar. Entonces sí podemos realizar esa esencia de la naturaleza de la mente, de la atención plena. Eso es la liberación y no tenemos que seguir viajando así a través de los 6 bardos.
nang sem lamplong se na ta successful da wa da nga zo ke pa nang do ge nang we chun de da tam che ngene se na sem le lo se je pa sem ge che ko pa lab dang wu ro den de je ma to ngene zhe pa se ne yo ma re na wa tam che sem ge rang wo yen pa ge den de je ge ko wa ling go yo re long go yo re pe na da nga zo nang de na yang ko don de zhe go yo ma re ko Tongba le mande pare. Tongba le mande son chadu semda roji kwa chade yo. Tende se ne teni ta te ta we je ke tokba de ye ma tham na ya dön de je na we chu kan de je yen na de la. Zin dang dang ti ten na ngarang je sem de pa Zimba Hiona Pakoran Tema, so was in same Koranga Sala Rasa Zone, the Topache, Chasoma Yena, Tatatelo Pakistonwa. Now I can mention in Zimbabwe, so on. Nana, Manana, Manangarang, same thing around Sala. Soktopas, Sen de Topache Joana, Teni taken to your race on Yoruba.
So here it says making projections in mind the path. So this making the path also, that Tibetan implies that it is done so successfully. So, and that means to realize making projections the path means that you recognize that whatever appears, any appearance at all, does not exist separate from your own mind. Whatever appears is just like kind of like a wave coming from one's mind, or the radiance, the light of one's own mind, and nothing else. So nothing really exists on its own like that, the way it appears. So what we need to understand here is that all appearances are the projection of one's own mind. And it is true, because even though things appear, they actually do not really exist inherently on their own. And therefore they are emptiness. When you recognize that, you see that whatever appears is of one taste with your own mind. And even if such a realization does not arise, at least understand that whatever appears does not ultimately exist the way it appears. And so if you just know that, at least you will not cling so much, and then the experience will not completely dissolve in your mind, and you're more able to sustain some stability of mind, of sustaining the natural state. Tilopa had said, it is not the appearances that tie you down, but it's your grasping at them. So if you know that it doesn't matter whether appearances appear or not, whatever appears or not appears, if you're able to sustain this mind that doesn't grasp with stability, then that really is sufficient.
Y entonces no hay fijación en la mente como era antes, y todo que surge de la mente también devuelve en la mente, y sabemos que es la misma naturaleza, lo que surge también la esencia de la mente mismo. Es como dijo el maestro Tilopa, no son las apariencias que te afiera, es la mente de afijación, o la mente que afija, que te afiera. ¿Eso está bien? No, dice que no. Sofía, por favor, ¿me ayuda?
Atar, no, lo que te ata son tu mente dualista, tu mente que se fija en las apariencias, eso te ata.
Pero no las apariencias mismas.
No son las apariencias.
Si no tenemos afijación, las
Exacto.
apariencias no hay un problema.
Exacto. Si no te fijas en las apariencias, no hay...
Nato jase lale na che yowa. Ache jase lale ta mampu ta yori ten. Jeta nawan da range semni do ne tupen ta tang jar. Teni hin zongzin sima na yela mazi se juti yowa jase lale. Te ten kare ringe tin mo do tela sabon do ore ta ta tong da.
So Yangchar la
So there's one.
Sen Juban Tatan Tar. Teni Hine Zungzin Simanam, Yilamazi, Yarselali. Yes. Yarselali.
Entonces en lo
So in the 37 Bodhisattva practices that many of you are very familiar with, it says one verse number 22, really explains this point exactly. So that verse says, appearances are one's own mind. From the beginning, mind's nature is free from the extremes of elaboration. Knowing this, not to engage the mind in subject-object duality, is the Bodhisattva's practice. So this verse really very clearly shows what we are speaking about here.
elaboración. Entonces, a quedar sin fijación de objeto y sujeto y objeto, son las prácticas o es la práctica del Bodhisattva. Es algo así, disculpa, no sé. Y no dijo exactamente cuál práctica es, pero...
Ta te tabaka Tonda de Naranga Karisiko Mon Choyala. Teni ta kanza re manda wala tene. Ketang kondro tante tambo te Shene la jang. Shene la tatanga zu sem namto mambo te tambo pe shawane tabe tapsi. Shawane de nani teni remba yendo ta lamtong sin sem karan yin. Te Jetawa yendo ngon chopa tan tong to tabe tabi. Tendesene. Ta te te mambo na tapor he de yorwa. Tetso tina yesen dala yang songwe yore.
Y
So what we need to understand here is so that even though there are different individuals of different capacities, generally speaking, when we practice the path, we first practice calm abiding, shamatha, so that we first are able to abide still. First, there's many thoughts in our mind. So first we need to train the mind in tranquil abiding. And then after that, we move on to Vipassana, special insight, where we receive instructions on how to recognize the true nature of the mind as it is. And then there are many different teachings and scriptures that explain that we always hear about. So also here, this is how it is explained here.
A calmar la mente. Y después de eso, poco a poco llegamos a tener la meditación de Vipassana o de insight, ¿cómo decir? No recuerdo. Y ustedes ya saben mucho sobre estos temas, ya tienen muchas instrucciones de shamatha y vipassana.
Teni kanza kakela Shene Rimba Yindo Gomna Teni Lantong Otu Goya Tende Mayimba Tambo Koran ni Che Sem Ngon Chu Songa Tawa Ngon Chu Songa Tawa Ngon Chu Ne Teni Tsur Gomba Tato ni Gomba Tsar Sine Che Yongo Yore Tabato ni Gomba Tsar Sine Teni Ngon Chu Songa Teni Ngang Kyong Ne Teni Tela Gombi Siya Gom Siya Che Yongo Yore Te Le Tang Te Sa Te Le Tang Kawa Dimba Kanza Monsong que tenía Yangba Chintan Trago. Chetan Narazona, Gomtoni Tawa Zarsin, Ramba, Yinto Gom Nani Tawa Zane. Tambo Hene Sem Nazope Tata Che Namdo Mambo Tanche Nyamong Mambo Tesarga Mahua, and Tinity Nani Tawats and Semkara, the Tina and Rambayan Aquasi. The Gom Nani Tawats are Segayoreva. Then the Conrotan Rawat, Coram Tendes and Hoyorona, so Chitam Shooter.
So there are some individuals who actually do not follow this exact path in this way. But there are some who right away recognize the nature of the mind without having to be introduced to the nature of the mind. So they have already recognized the nature of the mind. And then what they need to do is they need to habituate what they have recognized. And this is called finding meditation through the view. So first you recognize the view or the nature of the mind, and then you habituate it. And this is the case in the minority of cases. So there's just a few exceptions who have trained already in previous lives and who are karmically very fortunate. For the most of us, it is the other way around. We are finding the view through meditation. So we have to go in stages, beginning with the practice of shamatha. Because in the beginning, we have many thoughts and many afflictive emotions in our mind, and they first need to calm down. And then from within that state of calmness, we find the view, the nature of the mind. Then we are introduced to the nature of the mind. And so this is called finding the view through meditation. And this is the order of practice for the vast majority of us.
Seguir tratando a desarrollar shamatha porque ya tiene este foco de meditación que es de la naturaleza de la mente mismo, y entonces ese vuelve a estar la meditación. Pero la mayoría, especialmente en la comienza, cuando están nueva la práctica, ellos generalmente tienen que, la mayoría tiene que desarrollar así en etapas, haciendo primero shamatha y después vipassana, pero como hay muchos pensamientos en la mente, tenemos que primero calmarlos, y cuando la mente está calma así y no surge tanto estas emociones aflictivas, naturalmente puede llegar a tener realización poco a poco. Así naturalmente puede realizar la visión última a través de la meditación primero de shamatha y naturalmente llegue últimamente esta visión de última de vipassana.
Tene tata nacho hene te saraka timbo ndawo te cha ti jini tene ta lam thong jena ra sem tong sa sang che la an che te ha kong ki ha no go de wa che la nam do no me pa che tong sa sang chi te che hin dong kin chi ne yo de an do tende ke ne tan te 다 semgara hin mama te yin ba tende ri do tene te ta zam zam la tende che sui na che yong yong ye sa ri te an che te pa ngun da o ten zin mo ta sem ko ra hin mama se je te te ri de te nga to ta che nam to kar se ko che te chom ro ma bo je Ngunrun Zim Rock, Tundus Tenipa, Yang Con Tata Zimbak Demro Sarva. What Tundus in the Yamlis Gom to Jan to Tatendun, Dogane Tang Antone, Tata Satya Chimbo Zenaya, Yishi Zenaya, Nisume Pagatum, Song de Gandua. Zimba Chuni Ni Senechik Tata Gangaran Soke. Nangwa Chikang, Zimba Chayora, Techu, Nimitong Sasang Gantana. Tenderson, Detumna, Teni, Tet Agoms Sedin or Chagosare.
So now for our practice, we meditate and then gradually we attain some stability in calm abiding. And then we continue on where we then gain insight into the nature of the mind. And there is this experience of complete emptiness. There is no thinking at all. And within that space of emptiness, there is something that knows, that is aware, a consciousness. There is something that knows its empty nature. And that actually is then an experience of the nature of the mind, a true nature of the mind. So actually it happens to anyone sometimes. We have all come there, but we don't recognize it. We have all actually seen it, but we haven't recognized it at that time, that this is the actual nature of our mind. So because we don't recognize it, again, the mind becomes obscured by grasping. The meditation means to just remain within a state of such a recognition. And so we can call that Mahamudra or primordial wisdom, but it all is the same nature, the non-dual mind, where there is no grasping at anything whatsoever. There is no separation of the appearances and someone perceiving the appearances. So if one is able to just abide, sustain such a state, and that's all one does, then actually one's meditation practice will become genuine.
Hay muchos dudas. Hay totalmente una fijación o un apego a la conceptualidad. Y por esta fijación volvemos a estar
Oscurecidos.
Sí, gracias. Y eso, entonces, si llamamos Mahamudra, si la llamamos la, ¿cómo dice primordial awareness?
Sabiduría
primordial. O si llamamos el estado sin dualidad, todos son la misma significación. Y si hay fijación a las apariencias, si hay una concepción de objeto, sujeto y objeto, o yo y los demás, o algo otro de yo, no hay la sabiduría primordial. Esto es oscure la sabiduría, es de dualidad.
Tene Sende Tanga Sengara Higana Nego Namdo Mogosante, Otsuk Jaya Yo Mares, Otsuk Jana Tene Konando Manu Dori, Kurama Guyona, Tela Sohakawasi Nego Yori, Zopima Zene, Tene Goyori, Pena de Vaya Anamoti Zongona, Teta with Ayadope. kokale ya lulu ya jana kokale kale sene thanyere nyere chesene yongri mato ko zongo tene jitine de sona dene ko senga marwa ko jono ko ten jos jono rwa tina yesene gom jadu de rawa ngani che redo mepe ngani rawa sene jo esonda
And so when you practice meditation, try to abide within the natural state of the mind without doing anything to it. So don't think, I don't want to have any thoughts. Don't try to force yourself not to have any thoughts. Because if you do that, then actually your thoughts will increase. So the best method is to just allow your mind to rest in its natural state. Just recognize the mind and then just rest in its natural state without trying to alter it in any way at all. For example, it's like if you want to catch a wild animal, the best way is to let it be. Then there is a chance that it will come closer. But if you try to run after it and chase it to catch it, you will not catch it, because no matter how fast you run, the animal will always run quicker. So it's just like that with our thoughts in meditation. So just let our thinking be, have no hopes, have no doubts or fears. Just allow the mind to rest in its natural state. That is meditation.
Si haces mucha fuerza, va a escapar. Pero si estás muy relajada, sin ruido y muy despacio, poco a poco te va a acercar. Pero si ya estás con muchas ganas y si haces mucha esfuerzo, va a escapar. Y es así, tenemos que, con la meditación, tenemos que estar con mucha paciencia, muy relajada y muy natural, sin muchas expectaciones o mucho sin hope or fear, esperanzas y miedo.
Expectativas y miedo.
oya tati tiene pardo que chitela nunda oche ta pecha na ni che gona pe mangbo ndo tenga do don ro tu nyin ro tiene pardo la ta tomo da tomo ma yin ba ke te hun ro ko lo jang go ri tini tela chene ta lan dong go ni tini gom ja go ri se je te ta tiene pardo ka ke chi te ri sha don da do don ri.
Entonces, eso es como...
So these in brief are the instructions on the Bardo of living. Of course, in the scriptures, there is a lot of commentary on that, but I'm just giving you the essence of what we need to practice in the Bardo of living. So in brief, the instructions for the Bardo of living are train your mind in the common and the uncommon preliminaries, and then practice meditation, practice shamatha and vipassana. So that is really the essence of the instructions of the Bardo of living.
Hay todo para que tiene todo que ver con estas prácticas de preliminarios, comunes y no comunes, y también con las prácticas de shamatha y vipassana. Eso es esos son eso es la mayoría de las instrucciones que tiene que ver con el bardo de la vida.
Donna tam tatanga so tamjo ke mulu top sa de pe za jembo jiri kokap de chola ma so sin ningbo pe dong yo ba je si taba da de si je de ndo jena pando kaps.
Y en los
So in brief, in the Bardo of living, we have to understand that we have obtained precious human body with all the freedoms and advantages. And that is an extremely precious opportunity that we must not let go to waste by any means. It's very important that we make good use of it, that we make meaning of this life. So this is the instruction in the Bardo of living.
A usar vida para lograr al último, lo que tiene significación espiritual.
Oh yeah, teni tren tu chu tana zo ti teni jima nga zo ti trewa trillion des si thapa ti si tren tu chu ta tendre si on samtana ya.
Entonces ya.
So now we have run out of time, but later at another time, we will also make some time for questions and answers. But for today, we will stop the teachings here.
Preguntas y respuestas.
Okay.
Thank you, Lama.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Everyone,
you.
closing prayers.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lama.
Thank you.
Should we do some
Thank you.
dedication prayer?
Thank you.
Yeah, we do
Come on.
short dedication.
Thank you, Lamala. Thank you, Ina.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering if I can step in to volunteer in the Spanish
Que
interpretation.
por las
They really were
virtudes
not
acumuladas
accurate.
en los tres tiempos por mí